Hello, everyone. Welcome to the discussion of part three of The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker. Baker. I mispronounced. I made a joke about this last week. Anyway, we're going to talk about part three of The Darkness That Comes Before, which is the first book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy. We have been reading this one part at a time. So far, the discussions have been every 2 weeks, and they still will be for the next part. We will meet again the week of the 21st, and we've been publishing these on the Sunday after. After that, we're going to switch to weekly discussions. So part five will be immediately after. If you'd like to join us for these discussions, either here in this group or on the forum for written conversations, please consider joining the paid chewing forum. I have with me the usual group of friends. Steve, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Sure. I'm Steve, and it's my third time reading The Darkness That Comes Before. It's the first book I've read 3 times. The rest I've read once. I think this is the part where most people are like, "This is too much for me." So I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts on this part. So anxious to hear, and I'll try my best to not spoil anything. But yeah.
This is the part that I'm like, this book is going to become a favorite, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Mike, you're muted. Yep.
So sorry. My name is Mike. This is my first time reading the book, and I'm really curious what Steve meant by this is when people kind of. Do you mean they bow out, or they? Anyway, I'm just curious what you meant by that. But I guess we can continue with introductions. And I'm recovering from a cold.
And I am just now getting a cold. This is Carl D. Albert speaking, fantasy author and member of the Page Chewing Forum. Very excited to be here. I could guess, I think, since we're talking about it, why this might be a section where some people bow out. I can imagine it might have something to do with black bodily fluids.
Possibly.
That definitely was. So that was one thing I had spoiled for me ahead of time. I knew that was coming. I didn't know how or where, but I knew generally of its existence. And so I was prepared for that. Regardless, it's horrifying. But I think, it's intentionally horrifying. And I understand if it's not what someone wants to read. The other thing that potentially stood out to me was this felt like the slowest section to me. Felt like the least happened in this section, like by quite a lot. I almost expected this sort of pacing at the beginning of the book, but I thought the beginning, like the first act in particular, was rather fast paced. A lot of build up, climactic moments, even amidst all the character introductions here, it was just a lot of kind of sitting with the characters as they're wandering and meeting some new people who I enjoyed getting to meet. But definitely there was a lot of introspection. I'm a big fan of navel gazing, so I enjoyed it. Getting to know these characters, particularly Esmenet, a little better. But I could see it being maybe a little much for someone, particularly considering, not just the black bodily fluid, but that Esmenet goes through some just horrible things, that aren't necessarily, or at least seemingly not immediately plot relevant. I'm thinking of the stoning in particular as what a gripping, visceral, horrible scene that's, all too real, taken out of real, historical stories, but thankfully did not go, all the way down to the worst possible scenario.
Yeah, I did. I kind of knew from that she wasn't going to die anytime soon, I suppose, because I don't know how I know this, but she's probably one of the characters that sticks around for a while. But yeah, it still felt like, bad things could happen to her. Maybe it was because of something I read in the Wars of Light and Shadow book. Now I've none. I don't believe anything anymore.
I am curious, talking about that, what Steve is the lore keeper. He knows all. But for the other two, I'm curious what your vibe is for character deaths in this series. Right now, if I had to pin it, I imagine there are going to be some that are really brutal, but I kind of get a feeling that a lot of the characters, like the major characters we've been introduced to, we're going to see through most of this trilogy at least.
We know from the epigraphs that Akamian's going to live at least to see quite a bit of the Holy War.
Right.
It
Yeah.
seems like, I don't know about Esminette though, but obviously the question was for Steve. Sorry, I butted in. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, it's not for Steve, because Steve knows, he knows everything.
Oh, okay.
I'm curious, Varsha and Mike, what your opinions are here,
I actually my take on what I've heard of this book, just generally from various reviewers and but also people that I admire, is that this book does not hold much back. So I'm imagining, some pretty hardcore, gnarly deaths. But if you're asking about the main characters, I really don't know. I assume we're going to lose a few more people by the end of this book.
Like, do you think we're going to have a, like Game of Thrones is the obvious one to point to. I don't even know if it's considered a spoiler or not, but the first book, right, in the first season of the show ends with an extremely major, shocking death that sets the tone for the rest of the series. And I'm curious if you guys think we're going to have something like that. Like, we've lost Inrao at this point, but I wouldn't consider that, particularly with how early it is, an equivalent. So do you think we're going to lose one of the main characters at some really, I guess, climactic moment, but, well before the end?
I think I'm most afraid for Esminette. I mean, already she's being subjected to so much. I feel like I don't see things ending well for her. And I think that I don't know why I think this, honestly. I know people go on about how dark the series. I haven't encountered it yet, except for, dark bodily fluid. I don't like, I mean, for how much it is hyped, for how dark it is, I don't feel like I've encountered it yet. At least it hasn't lived up to the hype. So, but I still feel like maybe because of how Indrao died, I feel like Esminette might have a horrible death. Not because of the reputation, but because of what we've been reading so far. I feel like bad things are going to happen to Esminette.
I definitely think, I mean, bad things have happened, and I suspect more bad things will happen.
Yeah.
I have the feeling she's going to live, though. Like, she gives me, like, my gut feeling with this character is she's going to go through horrible, horrible shit, but is going to, like, come out on top. Like, she's going to be, maybe, like, not a good person, but that, like, she's going to survive. Like, she's going to be a survivor. Is that it's partially, like, just the, like, her general vibe I get, but also, like, look at this from a narrative perspective. Like, when this is your primary female character you have, and you're already subjecting her to, like, terrible bodily harm, I just feel like it is the rare writer in the 21st century who decides to then end their story prematurely, you could say. So I suspect we'll at least see her through the end of the trilogy, but we'll see. I don't know. Kellis is the only one I feel really confident will survive through everything.
Steve's trying really hard not to tell us
I think
anything.
if you're talking about the first 3 books, I don't think all of these main characters are going to make it, but I couldn't predict who.
Yeah, I think just talking about the first 3 in particular, because I think it's so hard to judge since they are kind of 2 different stories, is my understanding. Yeah, what are your thoughts, Mike?
Oh, no, just what similar to what I said earlier. I don't want to predict too much, but I wouldn't be surprised if what is his name, Prius, bites the bucket pretty soon. Seems like people that appear rather confident don't do so well. Or possibly this other leader, Mathanet. boy, the names are. I'm trying my best here. So I think a couple of those characters are going to may meet their demise. But
you saying what is his name?
Proyas. Yeah.
Nercy Proyas. Yeah, I could see him dying. I agree. I could see him dying horribly too. I don't know. Part of it, my wonderings too, is like, as someone who knows that this has influences from the First Crusade, I keep looking for some of the major players, and I'm beginning to suspect that none of them are going to be reflected one-to-one in the story, and that rather they're going to be like amalgamations of historical figures. And to me, Nercy Proyas reads so clearly as like one of the characters who ends up creating, I mean, spoiler alert about history, several Crusader states and retaking Jerusalem, right? And so like some people have to get to the end. And so I'm curious. I mean, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. If anything, I feel like his older, wiser, seemingly more morally sound mentor figure is the one that to me has like red shirt all over him.
I don't know that reference. What's red shirt? Sorry.
Oh, so it's like a pop culture reference where in the original Star Trek series, all the characters who would wear red shirts, you knew they were going to die. They were just cannon fodder. So it became this just like general lingo for characters who are set to die.
Interesting.
I thought it was a football reference.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, but I watched this. So Varsha was in the same boat. Thank you for asking.
There you go.
Sorry. I was one thing I was going to mention that I thought I would ask the group. I would ask the group. We were talking about Esmenet, and I found this section very interesting. I believe it's in the second part, the 10th chapter, where we learn that she asks her clients. I don't think she uses that word. What makes you want to be more of a man? I found that very interesting, and I wondered why does she ask that? Is it because there's more to her than we think? Is she just curious about people's destiny? I think there's more to her, but I don't know, and I'm curious what others thought. That I don't have the page offhand, but I jotted down that section because I think she shines a bit more, and she's featured quite a bit more in this part, obviously with it being titled The Harlot.
The Harlot.
Yeah. So I'm curious what others thought about that.
I think this and the conversation between Akamian and Ximenes, is that his name? Those were the two bits that made me really love this book. Like this was my favorite set of chapters to read so far. And I think the answer to your question, Mike, in my opinion, is in the passage immediately after when Akamian says it's a pity when she asked him to tell her stories, under the same pretext as she uses with all her clients. And he says, when she asks him what's a pity, he says that you're not a man. If you were a man, you wouldn't need to make teachers of everyone who used you. So she wants to learn. She wants to see the world. And this is all she can do for whatever her circumstances are. And she's doing the best she can. And there's also a passage earlier on where she talks about all prostitutes have a favorite type of custom, and the ones that she likes are, but Esmenet had always prized experience, those who had suffered, who had overcome, who had seen far away or astounding things. These were the men she prized. So, I think between this, it tells us that there is so much to her, and there's a lot of depth. And we even saw that to a great extent, I think, in part 1 when she was participating in the discussions between Indrao and Akamian, and she was sort of, congratulating herself and also feeling really happy at being treated as an equal in those discussions. So she's got some wisdom that she wants to share, and she's yearning for knowledge, it seems like. And yeah, so I am really eager to see what happens more with her. What do you think, Carl?
She's definitely the most sympathetic character that is still living at this point. I mean, she just is in such horrible circumstances, but manages to persevere. She's clearly not emotionally healthy. I don't think her like what she feels for Achamian is really as much about Achamian as it is about herself. Which one could argue that is true with all love. It says something about ourselves, but hers and his in turn for her, both I think says more about them, like themselves, rather than the objects of their love. For her, it is very much about that experience, that knowledge. I mean, I think she wants to live the life he's living, really, and that's why she loves him. I don't think that there's this particular spark one might look for. I like their relationship a lot. I think it's really interesting, but yeah, I mean, I find her just very compelling, very complex. Yeah, that you can see she yearns for more, and she is very intelligent, but she doesn't have a traditional education. So she finds her education in her way. She's living in her way. She's going to make it to Momin in her way. And unfortunately, that means using her body. And I think certainly the thing that is the most uncomfortable about it is not just, I felt pain. I don't know about you guys, even though I knew it was coming. Like, I knew as soon as that guy, the horseback rider, who was it? What's his name? The captain general. Saved her, that she was going to sleep with him. I knew that was coming, but it still hurt. And then to find out, of course, that he's an inhuman, flesh-wearing monster is just like, that's the thing that really digs the knife in. That it's like, she's even like, she has this agency in using her sexuality, but even that is being taken from her because these men aren't men. They keep secrets from her. She's being raped and she doesn't even know it. Right. I mean, like the horrible harrowing scene with the black fluids in question. I mean, everything around sexuality in this book is really interesting and disturbing. Like, I thought it was weird how she got aroused in like such an extreme, almost disturbing ecstasy from the monster. And then we later find out like the flesh skin changer also got like aroused by his master, that they have this like control over pleasure and these extreme sensory feelings, which is just an interesting, complex, just challenging idea to unpack. I think I certainly don't think what we've read so far has shown a very positive view of sexuality, but we're also, I think, seeing in many ways the worst of all of mankind. And so in this case, the worst of, man's kind. Well, it's not even just mankind. There are also races beyond men, and kind of the idea of sexuality and passion and, pleasure, physical pleasure, and how that can be, distorted into something monstrous. And it's just, it's harrowing to read about. But certainly it makes her just so, because she just keeps trying, like she does everything she can. She has great plans, to like blend in with people, to avoid pain in whatever way she can. But because of her profession, she ultimately is an outsider, and yet she keeps persevering and she keeps walking and she keeps finding a way forward. And I just think that's very admirable, and definitely makes her, to me, the most sympathetic character we have left.
That was also the part about how she did the best she could. Like, she I'm paraphrasing, but she says something when she's thinking to herself about the encounter with the consult, I assume. She thinks about how she's selling her body and she's sort of obliged to, but she still controls that how she can. But in that one encounter, she felt like the control was taken away from her. How she was made to feel was taken away from her, and that's what hurt. Yeah, I thought that paragraph was really touching. Yeah.
So quickly, just kind of touching on the mystery elements there. Is that which of them do we think are the Srank? That's the thing I'm struggling with. Is I'm like, is the bird transforming? Is some like super Srank? Are they all Srank, or is the flesh wearing creature who's like having physical reactions to his boss a Srank? I'm like, or none of them. I feel like at least one of them has to be, but beyond that, I'm like, I am struggling to piece together what exactly they are.
I don't think, I didn't think any of them were. I think that's another race of humanoids or hominids, if you will, in the North that don't seem involved. But you raised an interesting question, because maybe that's possible. Maybe the consult, these are the consult for me is, I assume they're not men, right? Are they non-men? There's a lot of questions there, but they have these abilities, right, to like change their form, and then there's the bird with the little dude's face, So I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions about the consult and who they are, but they're trying to bring back their no god, if you will. I think that's one of the big motivations. So I don't think those the Srank are connected, but I could be totally off.
Because the Srank are what fights for the consult.
Oh, really?
Was my thought. Just like that's their army. Okay. And so it's like the orcs under like Mordor, for example. Like in the beginning, that's definitely like what that's the consult. I'm a little hazy on if the No Man was with them or not. I forget exactly how that worked out. I feel like he was a separate faction, like he was his own faction, but I may be misremembering that. But we know that there was some sort of the no god, right? And then the Srank fought for him. I believe we've had that confirmed. Steve, is that correct?
The Srank fought for the no god? I don't remember if we know yet.
Okay. Yeah. So never mind. So maybe okay. It's sufficiently still. I mean, it's obviously very mysterious.
I think there's
a lot of
questions.
Dark factions.
I will say, going back to kind of like, what do we think overall about the part 3? I liked it. I liked getting the kind of breath of fresh air to simplify a little bit and not have. This is a thing I'm struggling with, but I don't hate it. It doesn't. It just slows it down for me. There was a paragraph I read today, actually, where I was like, there are 5 words here and I don't know what they are. I have to look them up. And I just went with it. I didn't look them up. In the past, I was like, I'm not looking anything up online, by the way. I'm going back to the notes. I'm being careful because everything will be totally spoiled. And so far, I'm proud of myself. I made one mistake once, and I Googled. This was for another book, and I think I heard you talking about this, Varsha, for Berserk. And I just like try to Google something, and it just it was like, that's the end of this is what happens to that character at the end, and it just shows up as like the first hit. So it's the worst. So bad, that was for Perdido Street Station. I Googled the one character's name. I was like, I don't remember why. I was just like, what does that word mean? And boom, I was wrecked. But it wasn't like the end of the world. It's not like you're still reading it, right? Not to go off tangent.
Yeah, I'm with you. Spoilers don't ruin an experience for me. I do generally like to avoid them, but it is so hard sometimes on the internet. I had so many with the Wheel of Time, I mean, I basically went into Game of Thrones knowing what happened, because the original story for that was, I won't side tangent too long, but my sister, when I was 14, sat me down and just like, she loves to tell stories. And so she told me basically the whole plot of the books of Game of Thrones up until that point. And the first season had just come out, and we watched it together. And they got to the incest and pushing Bran out a window. And I was like, nope, I am too young for this. I'm checking out. This was too weird. Watching this with my sister, I was like, nope. And I came back. I had to be like 19 years old before I could come back to it. This series, I definitely would not have been able to handle at 14. It would have been like, no. I do think I would have found the black bodily fluid just funny. I think something about that would have, my 14-year-old boy brain would have probably been like, oh, this is just so, of course. Because it is a horrifying image. Yeah. Horrifying.
Yeah. It did creep me out, but I think right now I'm bordering on funny more than that.
Fair enough. It is that weird, right? It's like that with horror, it's a very thin line between horror and comedy. Is like something that can so easily be like, just the most disturbing thing could also come across as deeply hilarious, often in a very dark way, but still like deeply hilarious.
Yeah.
And that's always, the struggle with that. I think for me, out of context, I think I would find it funny. It's in the context with it being on Esmenet that I was like, oh God.
It was a deeply disturbing scene, and for that, I think it's an extremely well written one for what it did to me as I was reading it. It felt deeply disturbing. The whole scene, like that, it concluded that way, but the whole scene, it felt like something really horrible was happening, which it was. But to evoke that image, I think it was really well done.
One thing I'll give to Baker too is I didn't feel that it was overly like, she's feeling pleasure in this horrifying way, but I didn't feel like it was written in a way where it felt like it was really objectifying her and trying to like be titillating. Like I very much felt like this was meant to be horrifying. There are definitely some poorly done rape scenes where you're like, oh, you're like edging into writing that like erotically, like that's, it's maybe not done in the best taste, but like this really read to me like, even though she was feeling pleasure, it felt horrifying. Like I think because it didn't focus in so much on her body parts, or anything like that. Like it was very much about just like the feelings and her like internal battle where she was like, this is wrong. Like this shouldn't be, this is overwhelming. This is too much. What's going on? I have no control over myself. Which is a terrifying thought, for anyone, but certainly for a prostitute, that's their entire control. Having control over sex there, like you take that away, what do they have?
Yeah.
It's just horrible.
I mean, and she was, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Marcia.
No, go ahead.
I'm reading back that section, and she is saying to herself what Akamian had coached her to do, which is be compliant. So she is, like, I didn't take it as though, I didn't necessarily interpret it as being raped per se. But it seemed there was definitely things going on that were very abnormal, obviously. But she was, because initially, she's treating it as though she's going to get, money for the work done, and then she negotiates and all of that. So to me, but the not to go back into all the details, but the description is clearly something of like he's stealing her soul or something is happening. He's manipulating her. He's clearly trying to get information out of her. And there was a section, and I mean, this scene is something else, really. Like there, but there's a section in there where it says he's trying to extract information, but I think she's able to resist and not give much information. That's why I guess, pursues her later.
I think it's the opposite. I think she gives him everything, but it's just not enough. Like I thought Akamian even told her, like, as part of the be compliant, like he was like, he knew people are going to come for her and was like, just tell them,
right,
it's okay.
But I didn't see that section where it must have. You're right. Then I think it glosses over it, but I didn't feel like she was able to. I don't know. I think you're right.
We don't hear exactly,
right.
I think, what she said, because I don't think it's ultimately that fruitful, you know, for the whatever that was. You know, I think anything she knows is ultimately insignificant. You know, all it really shows is Akamian, you know, is a piece on the board. Well, great. They already knew that. Like, I don't think it's that significant. You know, he didn't know anything from Inrao, right? Like, he didn't learn anything. Inrao died before he could tell him anything. So I think that was ultimately probably saved Esmanet's life,
right?
Too, that there wasn't ultimately anything worth keeping secret.
Are we to assume? So we should assume that. And now I'm blanking on the guy's name because he's important. He's important in this part.
The Captain General?
Sarcellus?
Sarcellus.
Yeah, Sarcellus.
That is the same guy from the end of part 1 when Inrao died. But he's not the real Sarcellus, is my understanding. That I don't know if these are the same people, in other words. You know what I mean? Because we find out then in. Actually,
that's a fair question.
I mean, question maybe for you. Or I'm just assuming that in chapter 11, we learn that he's the thing they call Sarcellus, right? He start being referred to as the thing, you know, as Sarcellus or what have you. But I'm not clear whether that's the same person from the end of part 1. Okay.
I think it is. Just because I don't know why, if they had a human loyal to them, they would then kill the human and replace them with this monster, rather than just keep, you know, the human and put the monster somewhere else. Because I assume they have limited, you know, that's just speculation, right? But my guess would be that is in fact the same. And we had heard before Sarcellus' kind of reveal as a bad guy of them wearing flesh. I mean, I think in chapter 1. There's mention of like, it's the person who kills the Crimson Spire guard or whoever it was who ended up being an informant for Akamian. Like right at the start of the book, there's the guys like wearing flesh. I don't think that's Sarcellus. I think that's the boss. I think that's probably the bird creature. I forget if we get a name for him or not.
I thought we did, but I
think that was a non-man.
You know how I am with names.
That was the dude with the coat of human faces. If I recall, and I think there were 2 of them.
Is that the same guy? Or did we find out? Oh, that's the same guy. I missed that completely.
I don't know if it's the same guy or not. There's a lot of stuff makes me want to go back and read, and I'm curious. Like I was thinking about you, Steve. This is the 3rd time, so there must have been a lot. We must have had so many questions. You know, I like it, but sometimes it does get a little bit overwhelming. But it's definitely keeps you going. But I wondered, like you, how you felt the first time reading it, especially this section.
I missed a lot the first time. I think they call the bird creature the Synthes.
The Synthes, yeah.
The first time I read it, I missed so much. That's why it's really, I think, like you mentioned, Mike, about you just kind of gloss over some words, and feel free to write them down. We can talk about them if you don't want to Google them. We'll keep them spoiler free, but yeah, definitely I missed a lot. There's just so much. There's so much going on unless you really take your time, or for me anyway. Like I missed a lot. I'm even catching things now that I missed the first 2 times. So there's a lot to it.
So I'm reading Synthes as like a title, like sorcerer or something like that. Would that be correct? It's not like a race
or his first name.
Yeah, like see how I can describe it.
It almost seems to me like a shapeshifter, sort of like.
Well, he's also on page, which I missed, but on page 327, he talks about the thing called Sarcellus talks about kind of like fantasizing about where the architect has been.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of names.
The architect. Hmm.
And this is the architect, or wait, or is that it, or is there an additional? I'm blanking on what it says exactly at the end there. You know, Synthes is like his boss, fake Sarcellus' his boss. But is he isn't the architect. We know he's not the top dog, the way he talks about things, right? He's like a general or something like that, you know?
I think when the small voice, the thing that Sarcellus has a conversation with is when he first hears his voice, Sarcellus says, "Architect, father, you would risk this." And then, yeah, I guess he's referred to as the Synthes, and then also he calls him, yes, old father. I think that's Sarcellus to him, right? Yeah, it's not the other way around.
I wonder if that's just a religious term, father, or if there's actually some weird siren going on here. Some genetic, I don't know, black magic, like sex magic, weird stuff going on. I mean, because we know they deal with weird black magic, sex magic. So I'm just saying that I think it would not be out of left field to guess, you know, that like the Srong, for example, were taken, like, you know, Lord of the Rings, if you've ever heard like the story that it was never canonized one way or another, but that orcs were made out of like tortured and deformed elves. Like a version of that that's even more fucked up. That's like, you know, the Srong were like genetically bred, you know, probably through horrible, you know, immoral means with, I don't know, humans, non-men, who knows.
The Consult are a priesthood of some sort, right? Because they spread the word of the non-god. Or
yes.
So there seems to be something there about what you said at the beginning about whether they are religious terms of some sort. Architect, old father.
True that.
And then there's this word, Mengi.
Yeah, I thought that was his real name. Yeah,
that's Sarcellus' real name.
That's his name.
Yeah.
Oh, oops.
I don't know if it's a coincidence that is kind of close to Moingus. I'm just with some of these names, I'm like, I can't tell if I'm picking up intentional linguistic similarities or if this is just like pure quinkadink. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, but it would be if this group is related to the Consult somehow. Moingus is part of the group that the Consult. What's the word I'm looking for? Wanted to hurt. I can't think of words, but right. So yeah, maybe it's the same language root. That's probably what you meant. But they are different groups, right? They are the oppressor and the oppressee. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm not. I don't mean to say that I think Mengi and Moingus are the same person. I'm just wondering if there is some sort of linguistic connection, or something like that.
To the name.
Yeah. Yes.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Because it seems pretty clear that Baker really built out the languages. So I do feel like a lot of this stuff is not, and I think he studied philology too, like Tolkien. Like I know he's like famous for the fact that he got like a PhD in philosophy, but I'm pretty sure he studied philology too. I could be making that up, but I think he did. And he certainly is interested in language.
No.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
There's a whole section in the appendices that break down the languages and sublanguages and dialects. So which I don't think a lot of
Yeah,
books
there you
go
go.
into that. Um,
Yeah.
No, not at all. So I'm curious, while we're talking about characters, how do you guys feel about Proyas, Nercy Proyas?
He feels a lot, he reads a lot like Confess. Uh, Not to say that they feel like the same character or person or anything. Like, it's got a similar level of confidence. And there's also the line about how when they meet each other, they acknowledge each other as heroes too. Uh, that, yeah, it just reminded me a lot of when we were in Confess's perspective.
They have that young warrior, kind of untested, but beginning to like show their worth.
Hmm.
But, yeah, haughty, definitely
Yeah.
maybe overconfident.
Yeah, feeling confident in their skills. And
Yes.
yeah, the world can't shake them so far.
Yeah, we'll see about that. How about you, Mike? And Steve, I'm curious, obviously non-spoilery, what your thoughts are on Nercy Proyas.
And also, Esmeralda, we didn't get to hear what you thought of her so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
okay.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think I would agree with what you said. I think the one thing that I if it was explained to me earlier, I did not recall, but I made the connection. I mean, it's clear, it's obvious here that Proyas is related to, or they're from the same nation or faction as the guy who basically Kelma Munis, the guy who led the 100,000 people to their death, which I have questions about, by the way. I'd love to come back to that. So initially, I didn't make that link, and there is a section in here. I was looking where I wrote it down in my notes because I think they're cousins, right? But basically,
yeah,
because Proyas, like, I guess he had Kelma Munis beat or flogged or what have you. He was lashed, and then there was and I don't remember who said this or how this came about in the story, but it's in chapter 10, and basically it's making the connection of, to me, it's kind of maybe related to karma or what have you. But so you beat up your cousin, and so your cousin had shame, or it caused him to be, it caused him to be less thoughtful, if you will. I don't have the exact words. And so that basically Proyas was being blamed for how he treated his cousin, who, led the vulgar holy war. So that to me stood out. I think it's actually, no, I do have, I think it might be like the end of our page 299 or so. So that, to me, that was the one thing I would mention, is the link to this guy who's, I mean, it keeps coming up. If we didn't understand it in part 2, the vulgar war and the what came of it is repeated multiple times, or for readers like me who need that, or maybe at least once or twice. But and anyway, so that was, to me, the big link, and they're, like you said, similar people, I think.
I found myself liking Proyas more, and I cannot explain why. I do not know why. Maybe it's because of his relationship in the past with Achamian. Like, he's someone I would hate in real life. Like, even taking out the fact that he's going to be, if he's not already, a mass murderer. Like, this is a dude who is so self-righteous, but there's something, maybe it's the fact that, like, we're seeing a bunch of people who are putting on kind of this mask. I mean, you could go to the Empire and that's all it is, right? And just for me personally, I guess, someone who's at least more straightforward about, like, who they are and what they believe is a breath of fresh air, I guess. You know, maybe it's that like seeming sense of integrity, even though he's like a big dick about it. Oh God, I felt so sad for Camion at the end there, where he was like waiting and wanting to meet with Proyas, and Proyas would not. I was like, oh man. I also struggle. I mean, they try to describe him, but I have such a hard time wrapping my head around. I mean, people change a lot. I get it, but like Proyas and Acamian getting along the way, it to me almost just seems like one of those like, oh, the kid was really smart, so of course the teacher liked him, rather than them having like the sort of emotional bond I really clearly saw with Enrao.
Yeah,
but I don't know. That may just be my reading.
Sorry, I want to hear from Steve, but yeah, I think you're right about Inrao versus Proyas. There was a bond there, but it doesn't feel like, I don't feel like we have evidence to suggest that Proyas ever really respected or appreciated Acamian.
Right.
Mostly just, I mean, there are indications that, Acamian like scolded him, or like basically was a teacher, right? Like he did what he had to do as long as he was being taught, but as soon as he was able to think for himself, he decided, I am rejecting all of this. But
right.
Yeah. Anyway, what do you think, Steve? Confess versus Proyas. That was
Well, Proya, Calaminus, bad with the names. He on page 299, although oath accepted, whipped Proyas before the eyes of the king in court, and that's the real reason why Calaminus never forgave Proyas. So he did it to deny Proyas almost out of spite, to as a way of like getting back at him. But Proyas, I think, has that effect on. I think a lot of readers like Proyas, and I think the way that he treats Acamian kind of gives you an insight on how, even though they have a relationship, I think it tells us a lot about how the world views Acamian and how they don't. He's kind of a joke. Like he's not a very good spy. Like no one really takes him seriously. He's always ranting about the consult, and like, okay, whatever. Like, we have other things to worry about. So I think that kind of tells us like how much respect the world has for Acamian, like how they view him more than how they view Proyas, if that makes sense.
Is it just disrespect or lack of appreciation for Acamian, the person, or the mandate schoolman? Because what he is repeating about the consult and so on, or the beliefs he shares, are with the schoolman. And is that the same thing as the gnosis, the ability to dream?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's different or same, but they seem to be well respected, at least among the rest of the schools, or at least they want what the mandate has, right?
I think they're just considered like crackpots, is sort of the thing.
Yeah.
They're the one school where everyone's like, oh, these guys and their obsession with the consult, like they're always telling us the end of days is coming. You know, they're like the generic like homeless guy you see on the street, the sign like the world is ending, and that's like what everyone thinks of them, right?
They might be viewed as like a doomsday cult, or but I think people they do
that's what they are.
kind of respect them to an extent. The one thing I will add about Proyas is that it does seem like he is able to he does have the capacity to show that he's made mistakes compared to who was the other guy we were comparing him to? I forgot now.
Confess?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Because my take on the Empire is they're the extreme of the most arrogant. They think they're the greatest thing. They have all the power, so they just could care less. They're clearly driving this. They're behind the scenes um, and doing everything they can so they can be in the driver's seat of this war. That's my, kind of my take on it. Maybe oversimplistic, but
Yeah, I think it is, the fact that Proyas shows some humility, and also I guess that he's kind of an underdog in a weird way. And like, because again, there's just so much about him that I shouldn't and I don't like. But for some reason, I still, when we were in his head, I found myself like kind of sympathizing with him a bit. Like, even about Akamian, who, I could understand why he would like not want to see this guy. I mean, that to me is really the biggest sign that he does carry some sort of feelings, is that he won't see him at all. Because whether or not Akamian is widely respected, like they have a history. And so you would think you'd at least like let the guy pop in and be like, okay, here's what I have to say.
mm-hmm.
But the fact that he doesn't, to me, that reads as a much more personal slight than it is, a kind of general philosophical one, I guess you could say. Because like even Zim, right, is trying to set them up, and Zim respects Akamian and is like very likable character. Zim, I thought, had some funny lines and yeah, real personality, kind of classic, gruff old war guy. I enjoyed him.
Yeah. I did not like Proyas. I think maybe because I'm trying to think why. Because I should, in theory, like or dislike him as much as Confus. Because I see them to be, at this point, very similar characters. But Confus I did not instantly dislike. Proyas I did. And I'm thinking it might be because I am primed to think about, the fact that he disrespects Akamian, and then the whole story that Ximenes told Akamian about how he had him flogged and then came to yell at him about not supporting him or whatever. Like, I guess all of that sort of primed me to dislike him, and then he didn't do much for himself even when I was in his perspective. I guess
Valid.
part of
No,
it,
he's like you like look at him on paper and you're like, this guy sucks. I don't know why I like him. I cannot explain it. Like I was speculating, but I don't know. It's so strange to me.
yeah.
Confus, he immediately pissed me off. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I think if he took over, I would have liked him more, because I've been like, okay, this guy gets shit done, But the fact that he didn't and got played by his uncle, who I hate even more, meant me that I was just like, this guy.
So
like
Confus I was sort of primed to not like, but like a little bit more than the Emperor, I think. Because I didn't like the Emperor. It's like someone
Right.
who is a bit of a nemesis to him. Maybe I'll appreciate him. I did not. But but this guy, first, and maybe it's also slight bias against him because, he's been introduced to us as a fanatic and someone who feels strongly enough to, and he even thinks about this himself. I think I underlined it, but about how politics makes you sell your principles to respect those principles or something to that effect. And yeah, so I can see why I could like him, I guess, if I had been slightly more open-minded, or at least not dislike him quite as much. But I feel like I went into it just primed to dislike him, and I
I did too, and that's why I'm like so shocked. I'm like shaken by the fact. It's like, I don't know why I like this guy. Like everything about it, I hate zealot characters. I hate them. Why do I like this guy? I don't get it. Like in any other book, I would be like, oh, it's the fucking zealot character. Like kill him. I can't wait for his brutal, terrible death. But for some reason, I just was like, okay, like I see you.
Yeah.
It's not like, I don't know. I can't explain it. We're all, nobody's perfect. I don't know what goes on in this little brain of mine. I don't know that I want to know.
I'm going to admit something may be unpopular, but I do actually identify a little bit with Akamian. Maybe it's because he's a little bit like older guy and just keeps following certain things that nobody else seems to.
No.
I don't know why, but I've actually dealt with that in my life, and so there's and then I mean there's other things obviously that he does that.
You cut off for a bit, Mike.
Shoot.
You're back now. You're perfectly clean now, okay. But we missed about half of what you said there.
No.
You were talking about relating.
Yeah, I was just saying. Yeah, I do relate to him in some ways because of the challenges that he's faced, and I think maybe his age, the stage he is in life, and I really did appreciate in. I think it's in chapter 9 where we learn that he's kind of doing his some detective skills. So I don't know. I appreciated that. I thought it was helpful that he's trying to work things out and what are the connections to these different characters. Obviously, that's a narrative device. I think that Baker is using. You didn't like that?
I hated that. That was my least favorite part of this entire book up until this point, where I was like, some editor came in and was like, "This is really confusing. You need to spell it out for the reader to make it clear." And I was like, "Oh no, you're doing this for 3 pages," and it drove me nuts. It killed me.
Okay.
I started seeing the large font, and I was like, "Oh, what's this? What are we? Yeah. What's coming?" And then I was like, "Oh, he's just telling us all this stuff that we've learned." And I get it's useful to reinforce, but for me personally, I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
I think I would have enjoyed it more if it was a conversation too. If it just wasn't so static, but it was him just literally drawing in a sand with a stick. And I was like, nope, I'm out.
You didn't like that.
That's just me. No shame if you enjoyed it. For me, that was the one moment where I was like, oh God.
I like what it told us about Akamian's character though, but I didn't like how it was done. I agree. I think it wasn't the best way. I didn't like it very much, but I did like what it told us about Akamian. So far it felt like, he's just this sort of, it almost feels like he's a very passive character. I know he's not. He's doing things, but so far he's just sort of being, not really wallowing, but it feels like he's there's a term in Hindi. I don't know if my husband made it up or what, but it translates to eating self-pity. So he eats self-pity.
Yeah, I can relate.
And and but here he's actually trying to do something. He's trying to take action. It almost feels like it. So that's what I liked about that section, but I didn't quite like how that information was relayed. I agree. So I sort of agree with both of you for different reasons.
Two things going off of what you were just saying, Varsha. One, I also like Akamian Mike. He's easily one of the more sympathetic characters up until this point. He does things that annoy me, particularly around Esmenet, and they together just annoy me. They're their communication skills are horrible. But whatever. It's a book. That happens. That's human. And they, even when they try to communicate, they just do it in the worst way. Anyway, that's a separate tangent. I like Akamian a lot. I don't even think he's passive. I would push back on that. I don't think he's passive. I just think he's really ineffectual. All we've seen him do is fail.
Yeah. I think that's a better characterization for sure. Yeah.
Because he's actively investigating things. The problem is he's not actually learning anything useful.
Yeah, I will say I'm not. Yeah.
The most useful thing he learned in chapter 1 about the Scarlet Spires and its relationship with the the assassination that went on and all that going on with the this Sisharim. Is that the other? Yeah, that's the most important thing he's learned.
I feel like he's working things out. He hasn't. There's no big huge
No, totally.
aha moments.
Totally.
I think there's a little bit of, my point, I guess, is there is some detective component here that some people just don't like, or sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't in books. But I kind of like that he's a little bit more of like, well, he's not an everyman, but he's somebody that, because he doesn't figure everything out, it kind of keeps us guessing, keeps us maybe. I'm just curious, as a character,
Absolutely.
and so I liked the other part that I liked. I guess it's not he's part of it, but it's he's playing that game, the Benjuka game. What did you all think of that? I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't quite understand it.
Yeah, I was really interested. I have no idea what was going on there, and I had no idea how to read that.
I
No clue.
Same. I can't say I understood much about the game, but the description went on for 3 pages. I
I liked
loved every bit of it. I loved the description of the game. I loved what it said. I love the way it starts is life is a
Mhm.
game, and then the whole thing about games having rules and life having rules, and then how it goes on. I loved that section. I loved it so much.
Steve, for you, did that section make a lot of sense? Like having reread things, or is it still one of those that is just like, what is going on here?
It's it's just so funny to hear you say that. The Benjuka. So, I'll try and say this without giving anything away, but I kind of gloss over it a little bit.
Okay.
I think from what I hear is that Baker had planned to release it like a board game. Like he planned to make it into a game, kind of like from The Witcher, how they had the Gwent, or what was it?
Gwent.
Kind of like that. I think he intended for it to be a game outside of the book. I'm not sure if it's ever going to happen, but I think he wrote it with the intention of wanting to make it a game after. And there are some ways that it ties into the story, so it's not useless. It's not like just him, having a good time. It does. There are some things you can take away from it, but yes, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me still. So.
Yeah, to me it read like, in this won't be a spoiler for people who haven't read the Malazan Books of Fallen, but in there's like a deck of cards that are basically tarot cards, the deck of dragons. And to me, like, there are all these readings throughout the series, and you have no idea what they mean on the first read through. Like, you don't know what they're talking about. You have no idea what they symbolize. No one explains it to you. But when you go back, they start to make more sense once you see the events that they're foreshadowing and the characters that they're foreshadowing and things like that. And to me, I felt like this was a similar sort of section. And so I that's why I was curious, Steve, is like, so does it, I mean, did any of it seem, based on what you read, to be reflective of, potentially events to come or events that have happened in the past?
Yeah, you can make some parallels. Yeah.
Some part of the game that we read, it felt a bit foreshadowy, sort of. Like it was trying to say something to us. I don't know what it is saying exactly, but that moment when Akamian realizes, as they are talking about the fact that the Vulgar Holy War lost 100,000 people, as he's thinking about that, he realizes that he's in a better place, and like he has to make one tiny move and then get in a better place. And then what's his name? Ziminim, that put him at a disadvantage, if I read all of that correctly. So it feels like we're being told that the Vulgar Holy War's loss gives Akamian a bit of an advantage of some sort. But yeah, I agree with you. All that to say, I agree with you, Carl. It feels like a bit like the Deck of Dragons situation, but not explicitly, because the Deck of Dragons, they play it each time to figure out what's going to happen in the future. But this feels like more like a conversation between the author and the reader, almost, to tell us, if you can figure it out, it might be fun for you.
I had a reading.
I'm sure there's.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I did have a
reading
on it. In that, so to me it's about if you are attached to something or grasping for something, then you fail. and that's that comes from various teachings, including Buddhism. Attachment is the path to suffering, and so I thought that's what he was commenting on. So, like, if you're bad at the game, you may be somebody that, and I don't know if Akamian isn't too good at the game or he just kind of gives up. We learn. I don't know if it comes up again later, but my take on it was there's some theme there about if you are just going for, whatever comes, the whims that come to you, whatever drives you, and you're not really thinking through the repercussions, it kind of connects back to the beginning of the story, the beginning of the book a little bit. But I could be completely out there.
No, I think that's really interesting. I like your reading there. Going off of that, so I did become more acquainted with Nietzschean philosophy since our last meetup, because I forget who was posted the link to sort of that extensive kind of summary of Nietzsche's writings and life. And I was curious. And so over a few days, I kind of chipped through it. And not only is it making some things that much more like I see what's going on here in terms of like specific characters and kind of philosophical ideas. But, one thing that really stood out to me is Nietzsche's idea that life is all will to power. It is all creatures, beings, everything striving for power. And that to me feels like the underlying current of this entire world. Everyone we've seen has been fighting for power in some way, even down to Esmenet. It's like fighting for that autonomy, fighting for control. All the struggles are about these struggles for power and having power over other people. No more obvious than the religious fervor kicked up, or Kellis's personal, one-on-one, not psychic, but it might as well be psychic ways of like manipulating people. And I think it is very interesting to see sort of the philosophical underpinnings that lie over this whole world, really, I can tell, and the work in general. Certainly there's ideas I think we'd kind of briefly mentioned in the thread of the Übermensch, the Overman, of this like superior being. And, after kind of reading more on what he's about, he basically epitomizes the will to power thing, and he's like the best at it. And he doesn't let, other people influence his ideas. That's another big thing of Nietzsche's, is like not being influenced by others, right, but influencing others.
Religion. Yeah.
And like, being very like, away from religion, away from anything, having your values and sticking to them and discovering those values inside yourself. And it just seems so reflective in the work, and in many ways in what we've seen of the Dunyain, certainly. And I think it certainly has a very strong relation, just the whole talk of like how you find your own values, your own inner strength, whatever your will to power is, tying that into this religious conflict is, to me, a brilliant way of approaching it. But also like just very clear. Like, it's like, yes, like this whole thing in many ways, like it doesn't get more explicitly like having beliefs imposed upon you than, a holy war coming in and saying, convert or die, we're taking over. And so I'm very intrigued to see how all of that continues to play out. And I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts, or if you happen to also read any little bits of Nietzsche between last session and now.
I have not, but now I want to figure out what you mean.
I see, I'm the only one in class who did the homework. That's okay.
You did extra credit. I barely got the pages right.
What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out. You mentioned that someone posted a link. Was it on the forum?
Yeah, it's in the Darkness That Comes Before forum, just like the general, I think, discussion thread.
Okay.
And yeah, any listener, please, if you want to see what we're talking about, it's really useful. It's like scholarly written. Everything has resources, like links to, you can go. I didn't read the books themselves. It's just kind of an overview. You might think like a Wikipedia style, but more kind of official and like clean and, written by one person who I guess was a Nietzsche scholar. I want to say it like came from like Cambridge or something too. But yeah, it was very interesting. Some of his ideas are really hard to comprehend. They are just so convoluted. And part of the problem too is Nietzsche kind of died before he ever created like an overarching philosophy. A lot of his ideas are just like anti-ideas. He's like, what is happening here is bad and doesn't work. And then he's never is like, and here's what works, really. He just has all of these kind of theories and challenges. And it's interesting, especially in the context of this series, to see how that definitely influenced things.
I see if we can find the link and then post it.
Yeah, I did. I think it was Do Unicorns Read posted it from a.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did quote it and tag you each in it.
Okay,
so.
Great.
Yeah.
I did watch a video, but it was a while back, and no, so that's not the same thing. I have attempted to read his writing, and maybe it's a translation, but it's super dense. I think. Yeah. I mean, it's like I wouldn't feel bad by trying to get another annotated version to help me read through it, but I was looking. Absolutely. I got some of the concepts you were mentioning, Carl. So and I think he's known for nihilism, but it's not just about nihilism. It's a lot more than, like you said.
I think if you can generally get the big concepts, you're okay. Like there are a lot of sort of sub concepts, and a lot of the concepts are related. But stuff like, the will to power, if you can understand that, for example, or like his whole statement too around like God is dead, humans killed him, like what he means by that. Yeah. And like stuff like that. I think a lot of his, philosophy too is very much based in the age he was living in. And so in some ways, parts of it feel old and outdated almost because our societies have come so far in different ways. In other ways, they're exactly as they've always been. But yeah, definitely recommend it because it definitely gave me a new appreciation for a lot of what we've been reading.
Yeah, I'll go take a look.
The extra credit.
The extra credit. So, the game, I forget. I think when they talk about the game, it's just about the game for about 3 pages, because I remember noting, okay, this has been going on for 3 pages, but I'm really enjoying it, so that's fine. But what was also happening during the game was the conversation between Zenimus and Akami, and that was the other thing that I really, really loved from this chapter. What did you guys think of that? I don't know yet how I feel about Cinnamon, but I love their relationship. Especially the bit about how they became friends over how what is it? Because Zinnemann noticed that Proyas was starting to reflect his teacher, and he wanted to meet the teacher because he liked what he saw in Proyas. And then they became friends because they shared a joke and whatnot. I love that whole section where they talk about how the friendship developed, and then we are seeing its current state. I really want to see more of their friendship. I would really like for one of the bad things we see that I've been promised will happen to not be the breaking of their friendship.
I also really enjoyed that scene. I think that was probably the highlight for me of this reading too. I found myself the most emotionally engaged. There's again a lot of navel gazing in this section. Particularly Akamian does a lot of, and Asmonad. I actually think they probably do an equal amount, but and I love me that, but I love the additional like human connection there, and it definitely was, you know, I don't know if it's wholesome, but it was more, it was sweeter than a lot of what we've seen, you know, for a while at least, you know, certainly sweeter than the shit going on with Esmonette. So that was absolutely pleasant to read. I agree.
Steve's laughing. Why are you laughing, Steve?
No, just the stuff that's, I mean, when you compare anything else with what's going on with Esmonette, it's like everything else is pretty like
Sunshine
warm and fuzzy.
Roses. Yeah.
That's true. Wait, are you saying that with what happened to Esmonette so far, or what might happen to her later on? Because, I mean, there were two really bad things that happened to her, but I feel like she's still pretty... Maybe I didn't register how dark the scenes were.
I would say 3 bad things happened, and the last one has yet to fully blow up in her face yet.
Oh,
I think,
yeah.
Well, arguably 4. Achamian leaving, I think, shouldn't be understated. That clearly was really upsetting to her. 2, black bodily fluids. That was traumatizing.
Yeah.
3, she almost got stoned to death. That scene was crazy. So harrowing to read. Really hard to read.
Yeah,
Excellently done. I mean, in terms of like just the pure writing, that may have been what I thought was just like the best written scene in this section. And then her latest relationship, you know, I think is because of what she doesn't know. I think that makes it particularly well, we'll see how it all plays out, but there's no way it's going to play out happily.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So okay, maybe my reasoning is she's strong enough to handle it. You know, like she's going to come out of this fine. I agree with you. I guess I'm indirectly agreeing with what you said, like way earlier in the conversation, Carl, that she'll probably come out okay. She feels like a really strong person. Like she's had a lot of horrible things thrown at her, but like, yeah, she can handle it. It's fine. She'll be fine. We'll see.
I agree with that. I definitely think, I mean, I don't know if she always handles it well, but she handles it. Like she endures some terrible stuff and manages to keep going, keep walking, you know, even when her feet are bleeding, she keeps walking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steve, we didn't hear you talk about Esmonette. Your thoughts on Esmonette in this section?
She's one of my favorite characters in the book. And as long as she lasts, who knows? But no, I think the fact that she almost struck me as someone who is in this, obviously the world, I guess the world that we're exploring, women aren't to have very little agency, but she finds a way, like everyone's saying, she finds a way to kind of blaze her own path. And even though she is who she is, she still learns from all the men that she interacts with. And she it's almost like she's, I think Carly mentioned, she's like, that's her education in a way, that she's choosing to educate herself about the world in the small ways that she can. And she's like a survivor. Like that's kind of the way I see her. And even though there was a line about Achamian that, you know, she wanted him, but she wanted his life more. Like she dreams of doing something more. Like she wants something more in life. She's not just resigned to being a prostitute. Like she wants more, and she has dreams, I guess you can say, of doing other things. So but like you said, she continues to walk, and she finds a way to, and the moment where she starts to leave, or she's out on her path, and she kind of like, I can't believe I've just heard about this and now I'm living it. And she was only just a small ways out of the city. It just kind of struck me as she's almost like a kid. Like she doesn't have a lot of experience doing many things, I guess. So she's evolving a lot. And I think a lot of people that I've seen, a lot of people who like DNF the book, they point to her struggle and the things that happened to her in this section that just like too much for them. And they have issues with the way that she's treated and the things that she has to go through. But I will say to any of you, or anyone listening, I should say, who have problems with that, I think just wait, just let the story be told. Like all these characters and everything evolves, so it's not all these things happen for a reason. So it's not just like just to torture the character. There's reasons all these things are happening. So of course I won't say why or what happens, but there's meaning to all of it. Like it's not just abuse for abuse's sake. Like there's a purpose to it.
Yeah, it didn't feel like
gratuitous, I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah, it didn't feel gratuitous at all.
Yeah, I mean,
To me.
the stoning scene was interesting, but I think that was sort of necessary because we need to know what she's bearing that tattoo, right? And that is clearly calling her out for what she is. So, and that has dangers that come with it. And the scene with the consult that's the consult, right? Yeah, okay. That also, I guess it was terrifying. I feel like it was necessary. We don't know yet why or what they might have come to learn from her, but I feel like that could it have been done differently, maybe, but none of it feels like abuse for abuse's sake. At least felt all right to me.
Well, yeah, it's not, again, I don't think it really feels titillating. You
Right.
know, I feel like that's so often where I draw the line, where it feels like they're trying to like make sexual abuse really erotic and hot. And it was a horror scene.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was written like a horror scene, and it's written from her point of view. And I think the concepts it's proposing are like deeply disturbing, you know, like, and potentially funny in a darkly comic way too. But like they're meaningful. Like this like many things in this book it's not done for no reason. Like it clearly has thematic, intentional like significance to the story. You know, it's adding layers, it's asking questions, you know, it's proposing ideas. It's not just about titillation, you know, just about getting the reader's rocks off in some messed up way.
And it's not like it's described and then it's over. There are consequences on her mental state, on what she does afterwards, the things that affect her, and potentially the decisions that she might take later on, I'm expecting. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I think what I appreciate about Esminette so far really is her strength and her ability to fight through pretty much anything, it seems like, so far. And also what we've been told about her backstory and what she's been doing to make the best of her situation, right? I don't feel like we're really told, I don't remember, we aren't told how she came to do what she does, right? We just start with her time as a prostitute and how she's making the best of it, which I really admire in that character.
Absolutely.
So, Steve, since we have you talking now, what do you think about Ziminette? Am I saying that correctly? For starters.
Ziminus.
Ziminis?
Zinimus.
Yeah, okay. Zinim. I think I mixed up Esminette and whatever this person's name is.
I'm just calling him Cinnamon from now on.
Cinnamon.
Okay, Cinnamon. What do you think of Cinnamon and a communist relationship? And also just like Cinnamon, I guess. That's a question to everybody. What do you guys think of the Cinnamon guy?
I think it just occurred to me now, we had talked about earlier about how the world or how the broader, you know, the general attitude towards the commune, but his personal relationships seem to be all very strong. Even if they do think he's a little bit of he's in a death cult or a doomsday cult. The people he has personal relationships with seem to are like drawn to him, which I think is kind of interesting. I didn't think about it until now, but curious to hear what everyone else was thinking of that character, Cinnamon.
Yeah, I like how you put that, because when you described how people think of a commune and that he's basically a joke, I wondered if I didn't register that, because I mean it's true, but it wasn't at the forefront for me. I did feel I did really respect Akamian, and he is one of my favorite characters to follow at this point. And I guess this is the reason why, because pe- Esminet looks up to him so much, and he treats Esminet with respect. He has some weird possessive issues there, but I guess they're somewhat understandable. And then this, and how the description of how their friendship started, I think that meant a lot. It wasn't like they met and then they got to know each other for a long time. Cinnamon Cinnamon noticed Proyas's behavior and realized it was because of Akamian. So the reflection of his personality meant enough to Ximenes to to actually go make friends with the guy, which I feel like is a really powerful statement about him as a person. Even though we haven't, I feel like the readers haven't really seen that side of him yet because he's been mostly moaning so far.
All right, hear me now. Enjoy this for the rest of your lives. Our trio, we have Cinnamon, then we have Proyas, which sounds, if you stretch it really far, like toast. Proyas. And then Aka, that's kind of a sound you make when you crunch something. So I'm now calling this trio Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Nice.
And that is canon in this podcast. They're my boys, Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Sounds good.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, no, now I'm going to make me and everyone else hungry.
I need some cereal. Yeah.
Can I wanted to raise another question that's unrelated. I know this came up earlier, but it comes up again here. I don't know yet if I am bought into the fact that these 100,000 people died. I believe it might have happened, but we don't know the details yet, right? And how does this is going back to this vulgar war thing. I assume that it happened, but so then and I guess there were 2 for 1, but does that mean there were no casualties on the other side? That's a lot, by the way. If you look at like battles in history, like that's a crazy amount. And I have many questions about how were the what are they called? The other guys, how were they able to do that? It's not that none of that has been explained, right? So
the Kyanine Empire.
Thank you. Exactly.
So they were the ones who have the Scissorim sorcerers, right?
So yes. They nuke them or what? Like I'm just curious. Maybe we'll find out. I assume we'll find out. But I'm also wondering, like there was a part in here where they were like, how did that happen? Like, oh well, we don't know yet. Anyway, there's something about that piqued my interest.
Yeah, I think one plausible theory for me is the nuking by sorcerers. We've seen some version of it, I suppose, with the Sylvendi and I forget the name of the empire, but Confus's army, basically, where they decimate the Sylvendi. And how big was their army? 10,000 people. That was, I don't remember, but I think the Sylvendi were numbered to be about 10,000 or so, right? So, and the sorcerer group was pretty small. We could, in theory, have 10 times the number of sorcerers, which I guess we can assume they do have, to decimate an army that size. But what I have trouble believing is that the army was in fact that big, because it is a very, very large army, I think. So I'm saying this because it always trips me up, like in fantasy books and maybe in some history stuff that I've read too. They're like, oh, that's a huge army, and how many people do they have? 2,000 people. Okay. So 100,000 is a very large number for an army. So
we do know that the majority of them were just like random people, like women and children and like old people and like whoever the the lame, like just people who just like followed along
Okay.
to go to Shime. So I think that's what accounts for the numbers is I don't think the majority of them are actually an army.
yeah.
I have to imagine it's probably only like 10 or 20,000 people that are the army. Otherwise, yeah, you're right. That's insane. And it's such a bloated number. Equally for, destroying them. I mean, it's not, we get that you use the word decimation, Varsha. We get that word from Roman, as consider this enormous damage to an army. That's deci 10. That's 1/10 of an army. That is an enormous massacre. So how the hell did they wipe out 100,000 people? Now, yeah, maybe magic is the answer. Maybe they nuked them. I'm kind of thinking, I'm with Mike that I don't know that I buy it. I do think they probably got like just destroyed, just like embarrassed on the battlefield. Then their leaders were killed, which I think was maybe the most crucial thing. But I suspect that probably tens of thousands of them are just like ran away and are now like starving in the wilderness or something, or being picked off. I do suspect if you went to the battlefield, there would be an insane number of corpses, but I don't think it would be 100,000 corpses, because that is just an insane, like that's almost unfathomable. I mean, you think about wars today, and like how many people die in any number of, bombings or anything, like 100,000 in like one day, presumably.
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
So Gettysburg was 50,000, but that's both sides, and a lot of them were not battle casualties. I just looked it up for comparison's sake. But then I think it says somewhere like only 30 or so people lived. I mean, it's just maybe there's just something about it. I don't think it's a big plot hole, but it's one of the remaining questions I have going into the next.
Right. It could just be something where maybe Baker's just like, yep, it was done. It was magic, whatever. And we'll just have to like roll with it. But I'm with you, Mike, that I think like, I feel like we have reasons to question that number that's given.
And also, I think the conclusion that they're drawing from that is that that other side is, they are incredibly powerful, and now it's going to be difficult to defeat them, sort of. But did they take absolutely no damage? Right? Like what you were saying earlier, Mike. It feels almost like this army must now be at an advantage because they should have taken some damage from. But then if it was over the course of one day, probably not. Yeah, we'll have to see. I feel like we might get to see more of that later on when people actually, like the people we are following, actually show up there.
We've got it. They have to address that, right?
Yeah.
Like we got to see a battlefield full of corpses or something. Like,
yeah.
Or like I don't know. There's going to be something, because that is just such an insane massacre, which we again have not seen. So we've only been told this secondhand and third hand and fourth hand.
It's mentioned many times in several of the chapters in this part.
Certainly it's meant to mess with the Crusaders' morale. Like that much is obvious, right? It's meant to weaken Maithanet's power, right? And, frighten the Crusaders before they really even get going.
Yeah, so this is all spoiler free, but just a couple of things to consider is, first, it's like hard to comprehend that many people dying, but it was, I think, Carl, you mentioned it was like the tag along. So it was like the cannon fodder basically, but that number has significance in some political maneuvering going on too. So,
yeah. Makes sense.
I think so.
That's a nice round.
Makes sense to me too.
So, new topic, unless anyone has more to say about this. In the conversation between names, the crow and the architect, and
Synthes,
Yeah.
the architect, however you want to refer to him.
Was it in that conversation where he says, I'm able to change face, and then what's one bruise among so many? Meaning that if they see the mark of having used sorcery, they wouldn't get caught. Was that where that happens?
Yeah.
So this person changes shape and is able to sort of hide that they can do magic. Which, okay, so new theory, is Maithanet also consult?
I don't think so.
No.
Because I think he would have been in on that meeting. I think he's just unwittingly being manipulated, if anything, as he's trying to manipulate. Like, yeah, I don't think so.
So you think... So is Maithanet useless, or is he all powerful ish? Because there's two interpretations to all the events, right? And I guess the people in the world are also sort of confused. Like we saw at the end of the last section with Confus saying, maybe like how does he even know about the Scarlet Spires and what happened with them? But then there's also the fact that he let the vulgar holy war get completely out of hand, and now he's just, I don't know, praying or something that and meditating to figure out what to do next or something to that effect. So on the one hand, it feels like he's not super powerful. He's just sort of someone who bit off way more than he can chew. But on the other hand, it feels like he could be someone really powerful. Which side? What are your theories there?
I think both. I think he's both. I think when it comes to like the realms of men, he's quite effective at what he does, and he probably has some magical something going on, or else the Dunyain thing, or there's something going on. Well, we know he has magic, right? I don't, even if he hasn't casted it, maybe he's never cast it, but he can at least see it, so he has that ability within him. But I think the big hole for him is I don't think he's aware of the consult. Like I don't think he's a member of, or was ever a member of, the mandate, and I don't think he buys what they're selling. I think he is unaware that the consult has infiltrated the Thousand Temples and thus the Crusade. I could be totally wrong about that, but otherwise I don't know why, unless he is allied with them, why he hasn't noticed that Sarcellus is clearly off.
I think this is there's at least two of these kind of X factor type of people going on here. One is, now that we know that Sarcellus, this type of a being can exist, that opens it up for any character to possibly have been somebody that we don't think they are, right? Which I find, this is just excellent, work being done by Baker here. In addition, we also learned that, excuse me, Kellis's father was kind of embedded in the Skilbendi. So there's potential here that the people who we think are, who we think they are not necessarily, you know what I mean? They could be, there could be many characters, or a few other characters, I should say, that are potentially consult or what have you, because it seems, I mean, not to make it seem like a big plot hole or whatever, but once you wield something like that in a book, it's like kind of like time travel, or you know what I mean? I know you guys are also reading science fiction and stuff, but it kind of blows it up for me in my mind that anything is possible. So I don't know if I answered your question, Barsha,
Totally.
but I think anything is possible.
No, that makes sense. I like the comparison to time travel because, in every story that has time travel, I'm like, if you don't do it well, if you don't give yourself rules, you're just going to go and be so inconsistent with everything. Given how much people love the series, I doubt that that's going to happen. But yeah, it does certainly make for interesting storytelling to open that up in the world that anyone could be anyone else.
We
Yeah. Oh, there was mention of.
Oh
Sorry, go
no,
ahead.
no. I was just very briefly. We don't know a lot about this Mathanet. We haven't had a lot of eyes on him. He was paraded out and he made this big declaration, and then we don't have a chapter with him. We have a few pages, so it's a lot of big question marks.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we do know about him is that he is mysterious and that no one knows anything about him, and that he came out of nowhere and rose up in a very short period of time to become the Shriya. Like that, literally what we know is he's an enigma. So yeah, he's very interesting.
Also, I don't think I quite registered this in the previous parts if it was mentioned, but Akamian and other sorcerers, they are blasphemers just by virtue of being sorcerers. So if Mathanet is a sorcerer, then he, the leader of the crusade, is also what's the word, blasphemer. Yeah, he is what he's fighting against, sort of. So
absolutely,
yeah, that dynamic is going to be interesting also, I think.
Agreed.
And the people that seem to really want the Holy War Crusade, it's not about, to me, and this is true, I think, in the real world, in some ways, it's not just about religion. It's not just about faith. It's about conquest or control and power, as you said, Carl, and mentioned, earlier. So I believe that's a possibility. As you said, Marcia, that that this enigma character, he could be anything. Anyway, I think we got some interesting theories here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Steve, I'm curious. You always highlight such interesting passages. What have you highlighted this time for us? You're muted, by the way.
Let me pull up my note. I had a quote. Let me pull it up. On 322, there was a quote. Let me pull it up. The suspense. On 322, it'll be like the light after a long darkness, he had said. It will illuminate and it will blind.
What's the context of that?
When Sorcellus had told her it would be like this, how many times had he apologized for the discomforts of the road? He traveled frugally, hearing crucial correspondence for the Grandmaster and the Shrill Knights, but he insisted this would change when they reached the Holy War, when he promised to keep her in the fashion befitting her beauty and her wit. So it'll be like the light after long darkness. It will illuminate and it will blind.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you guys think the consult, assuming that we are dealing with a consult here, had her followed, Esbonette followed, and that's why he managed to come to her rescue, or it was just a coincidence? Because I guess at first I thought, oh, it's a coincidence, but like they clearly were aware of her as a piece on the board, and they even talk about it. Although I don't think they ever say anything about having her followed out of the city.
Yeah, I'm not sure I don't think they mentioned having her followed, but I think they mentioned that she may be of use to them, even though she didn't provide much crucial information.
Right.
But
if they did want to keep an eye on her, would it be presumably the most important person of the Holy War, or like the second most important after Mathanet, right? That's who the Knight Commander is. He's at least like,
I don't know. I mean, he's definitely one of like the generals
Hmm.
in their army, or like a commander in their army. But I mean, I don't think he's like near. He's like the leader of Nathanet's guard, really.
Okay, I kind of got the impression that he's sort of like one level down from Ethernet. He could have siblings, but sorry. Anyway, I'm using the language, but anyway, what is my point? Yeah, he feels like a really important person to have sent after her. So either they think that she's supremely important if he did follow her, or maybe they sent someone else and then like he was able to show up there on short notice because of powers unseen.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely important. I agree with that. Yeah, totally. And yeah, I don't know.
I forget how this topic started. We were talking about
I have a
I was just asking based off the passage.
whether
It just makes me-
Espenet got followed. Yeah. Okay.
What else? Do you have any other passages or particular things that stood out to you, Steve?
There's another one about Espenet. She talked about Akamian after the encounter. She said, "I survived Akka, but I did not survive."
Damn. Esmenet out here. So sad.
Yeah.
Can I do one?
And of course, Hesito's Black was another movie. That's,
Yeah. Go for it, Varsha.
Oh, sorry.
go for it.
When we were talking about the game Benjuka, some, it was said, had bent themselves to the Benjuka plate and lifted their heads as prophets. Akamian was not among them. I thought that was hilarious.
There's a lot of good dry humor in this book in general, and particularly around Zakamian and that scene in particular. Their dynamic definitely had some nice, good old wry, older men joshing with one another. It was good.
Can I do a quote?
Yes.
Please.
So this is the second page of chapter 11. Yeah, it's just I thought it's not somebody's voice. It says, "Politics," he thought sourly, "it was not as the philosopher Agensis had written the negotiation of advantage within communities of men. It was an absurd auction that it was more an absurd auction than an exercise in oratory, one battered principle and piety to accomplish what principle and piety demanded. One sullied himself in order to be cleansed." This is an interesting quote on politics, and it continues further on there about how you need to get dirty and you need to sully yourself, I guess, to be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that
absolutely.
A little long. I wish I had
Rings true.
paraphrased it better.
I think I tried to refer to it earlier at some point and then I completely mangled it. I'm realizing.
So how about one of the epigraphs, the very first one we get, "And the non-man king cried words that sting. Now to me you must confess, for death above you hovers. And the emissary answered, ever wary, we're the race of flesh, we're the race of lovers." So this is, presumably about humans, right? The emissary is presumably human, considering it's an ancient Cuniary folk song. So one of their emissaries to the non-man king. It's interesting, I don't know, the dynamic it introduces between the non-men and the humans. Leaning into the human mortality, right? And that in some way defines them, right? We're the race of flesh, but also we're the race of lovers. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting way of referring to humanity, and particularly pitting those two together, flesh and lovers. With the chapter about Esmenet.
I like that. I never am able to make sense of poetry, so thank you for explaining that. I have also an epigraph, the chapter 11. I thought this was my favorite of the three we read. Reason, Jenkins writes, is the capacity to overcome unprecedented obstacles in the gratification of desire. What distinguishes man from beasts is man's capacity to overcome infinite obstacles through reason. But Jenkins has confused the accidental for the essential. Prior to the capacity to overcome infinite obstacles is the capacity to confront them. What defines man is not that he reasons, but that he prays, which I guess is open to some interpretations if I read it correctly. Like praying, does that, I mean, I read it as praying means that you're not confronting obstacles, but is that the right interpretation? Or
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I struggled with that one to understand exactly what it was saying. Like I understood the first part, and then it was the prayer line that I was like, wait, what? And I guess, yeah, I mean, I think that makes the most sense what you're pitching there, Varsha, that by praying you're not actually confronting, or you're not overcoming it yourself. I guess you're just faced with a problem, and so you pray.
you're hoping for it to go away, sort of.
Or-
Like
Right.
that's the interpretation.
That the
I have.
divine will come in and solve your problem.
Right. Which no animal will do, right? Animals don't pray. Not that
For the praying
and
mantis.
so you're right, there you go. Yeah, that's right. The praying mantis, the supreme being on the planet. Yeah, no, that is really interesting. I'm glad I like your interpretation, Varsha. That I think that sort of clarifies things for me. 'Cause I was like, prayer, confrontation, prayer. What is he saying here? Like, I got what Agensis was saying. I do not get what you're saying. Later guy writing about Agensis. I was like, what is
Oh,
these philosophers talking about philosophers? It doesn't get more navel gazing than that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of missing the what is it? The Manifest Delusions epigraphs, where someone will say something profound like this, and then there'll be another quote from someone else who'll call the previous one a twat or an idiot.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So, we could throw in a quote from Carl here saying, what's this person's name? Who the quote is from?
What are we quoting from?
Ikianus is a twat. Carl
Oh,
Albert.
yeah. You just got to keep it real, you know.
Yeah, I keep expecting to see a counter epigraph. Yeah.
It's like, no, he's the worst. He's a twat.
I was supposed to read that this year. I know you all read. I think you read the series, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we finished it a few weeks ago. It was a lot of fun to discuss.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, you just start that wiki. I need to get that wiki together.
Oh yeah. I've
Yeah.
got to help with that. But I'll do a whole page on epigraphs because that was my favorite thing about that series.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Anything else that we should talk about before we sign off?
I think we hit everything that I wanted to hit.
Anything from you, Mike? Any last thoughts?
No, I enjoyed this section. I don't have anything else to add right now. I covered most of my notes. What about you, Varsha or Steve?
I think I'm all
Yeah,
covered.
covered all mine. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Steve, what character are you most excited to reread about in the next part?
Ooh. Well, the next part is with the warrior, I think.
I think so.
But I'm probably most interested to read Proteus again.
Interesting. Okay. Cool. So
If he's in this part, I don't remember, but yeah.
It's possible. I guess we're building towards them all coming together. Maybe if not at the end of this book, in the next book, perhaps. But
What about you, Barsha? Who are you looking forward to reading about?
who am I looking forward to reading about?
One character. Pick one character.
Probably. I'd like to see. You said one. I would have said Akamian and more cinnamon together. But yeah,
We need more Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Cinnamon Toast Crunch. That counts as one person, right? But no, I think Esmenet probably. I like reading her perspective the most. If Esmenet, it's likely to come back in the next section. That's who I'd like to see the most. But if not, I wouldn't mind going back to Nayur. It sounds like we might because there's a Steppies chapter or something in the next section. So
That's a great transition because my answer is anyone but Nair. And so I am so looking forward to this next section, the Warrior. No, we'll see. I'm hoping we get some Kellis, so I'll say Kellis.
Yes, actually, we haven't seen him again. What's your answer, Mike?
Yeah, I'm going to say Kellis. It's been a while since we've heard from him, unless he's somebody that we, you know what I mean? He might be somebody that we've been introduced to. I have a lot of, I guess maybe I'm a skeptical person. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right word, but I just, I'm not taking anything for face value.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, and
that's very appropriate.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
I'm also not getting attached to anybody because if I like somebody, they might do something awful, you know, at any given time. I think anything is on the table here.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about it in terms of people I like reading about as opposed to people I actually like. Like you said, I'm trying not to get attached because we've been promised that things will change and people will change. So, good.
Yeah, I'm ready for Esmenet to just like destroy me. I know she's gonna do something that I'm gonna be so upset.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about it. We'll talk through it.
I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna hate it. I'm gonna be like, God, you're the worst. But it was so good.
Cool. So let's do outros now, I guess. Carl, since you were last time, would you like to start us off and tell us where we can find your books? Which, by the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning, we're going to be reading and discussing early December. So if you'd like to join us for that discussion, come check out the Page Chewing Forum or consider reading along with us. It's going to be a fun discussion. God, Truth of Crowns.
The book is called Truth of Crowns, book 1 in the Ash Eternal series. I'd love to get some more new readers to join us for this. I'm very excited. I know Paramita has already blazed through the book, it seems like.
In like 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah, really. Steve said go, and Paramita was like, all right, I'm done. Are we ready for lap 2 yet? But yeah, I'm Carl D. Albert. You can find me at Carl D. Albert on most social media sites. I would love if you would find me and all these other lovely people on the Page Chewing Forum. It's really a wonderful community. And
Mike?
Yeah, I'm also on pagechewing.com. I have a pretty decent community reputation at 202. 0 warning points.
Nice.
It's a great place. I'm so lucky to have found this. I really look forward to these discussions. So yeah, thank you so much for organizing these.
Nice. When I first joined Page Chewing and started interacting quite a bit, I had a secret goal to make it to 1,000 reputation points. I'm now at 1,500. Now my new goal is 5,000. Anyway, Steve.
I'm just learning about this now, so I'm gonna have to. Coming to this competition late. Got to speed things up.
There is like a trophy, like an awards mod that I used to have installed that I don't know if it's Still might be there.
So there is a thing called. I'm probably the only person on the forum who tracks it. There is a thing called days one, where
Yeah.
you win the day if you get the most likes or reactions. And I also
Incredible.
track how many days I win.
So yeah, if you want to get that, please, and if you want to crush Varsha and her ginormous ego, then please come join the Page Chewing Forum so we can all team up and overthrow her. This is our holy war.
Learning a lot about Varsha tonight.
Why, God? What did I ever do to you?
I just see a victor and I think, you know what? They're standing up too tall. It's time to bring them down.
Fair enough. Except Steve is probably who we need to attack because he's got like 500 days one or something.
I have quite a few. Yeah, I was just checking. I have quite a few.
The king of page chewing. Yeah, we're coming for you. The revolution is coming, my friend.
Yeah, let's do it.
Anyway, Steve, your podcast.
Yeah, you can find me on pagechewing.com or pagechewing on all the podcasting platforms. Best way to find me.
And you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. And I also have a podcast called Bright Threads in the Tapestry, for which eventually I have marked out 2 things that I will discuss from this book in a Bright Threads episode, or 2 different Bright Threads episodes. It might be a while before that comes, but anyway, we'll see everyone in 2 weeks. And after that, we will meet weekly. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.